Um, in Trinidad and Tobago, there is the Federation of Trinidad and Tobago Federation of Women's Institute, and that comprises all the NGOs. They first started in 1944 by a nurse in Cuba, and it was sometime in the 60s that I think when the Ministry of Community Development came on, that they brought all the NGOs together. Now this federation, it was similar to how we have service commissions and so on now. Our first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, he used to source people to serve on state boards from this organization. It is also an international organization. And towards the end of this month, I think it's from the 27th to the 29th, the Caribbean Women's Association, they're having a conference, and it will be held here. So that this body of federation, in terms of all the NGOs, is also a part of what we call CARIWA, the Caribbean Women's Association. And it is also an international body, and there's a big conference in August of this year in Birmingham, England. So, but many people do not know that there is a body that governs all the organizations. And I was thinking, before you ask the question, to put it to Ms. Bishop that if it is, she can use her, I don't want to say authority, influence, thank you, to get maybe the, if it is the executives of the various civil societies and NGOs and so, to come together and have a conference and let us decide, let us look at the issues of our Twin Island state. And whatever transpires at that conference, then each organization would know now to revisit what they are doing. And because many organizations see about their just a community, okay? But we have an overlapping of some of what is being done, and we have other areas that are not getting the attention that is really needed. And so I would have liked to ask, and I'm asking you, to use your influence to put it to the government and let us get something going.
I wish I could say that I had such influence, but I don't. One of the things I could say, though, in trying to describe the evolution of NGOs, you saw the passion of interest groups, like the mothers and the parents of retarded children, the parents of deaf children, you know, the children or family of battered women in the setting up of different agencies. That kind of passion is sometimes very specialized and dedicated to topic areas. And so NGOs don't necessarily want to belong to an umbrella organization, but they certainly want, as they discover that the issue they're addressing is kind of universal, that it's not just restricted to the few people they know in Maribela or in San Fernando or so, but that it is widespread across the country. They want the government to have the scientific research, the administrative, to provide, to respect the experience of people who have struggled to develop the service and to take that into consideration, but also to support it by sometimes providing administrative supports, maybe accommodation, to see some of these services as being in need of universal spread across the country. You understand? We talked about the early childhood centers, and you see how they would come and say, and I'm not involved in any politics, that, you know, we have put up 95, 100 across every community in Trinidad and Tobago, and X number of teachers have been trained. The movement from charity to a policy development thing requires what we were talking about, Josh has been talking about, that you have to do the research, you have to speak to these people who have done the hard groundwork and to incorporate their experience into the evolution of a national programs by community. Now recently I heard the minister of, local government talking about the experience of Tobago, where Tobago has all these experiences of evolution of services for Tobago. And the other, what do you call them again? We don't call them what we don't, counties, if they were given the same attention, would address the needs of the different communities, counties, in a very dedicated kind of way. So if in your community there is a lot of child abuse, or there are a lot of deaf children, or there's a lot of violence, then the dedicated attention would come from the people working in that community. It requires, that's why I'm saying, we are seeing that some of the problems that NGOs have addressed are universal. They're spread across the country. So if you only have a total service in Port of Spain or in San Fernando, when you have deaf children all over the country, or you have children with learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, and there are no services for them, then social policy is about asking the question, how widespread is this problem? What kind of competencies do we need? What competencies do the NGOs who respond have? Because all the NGOs that are or not for-profit organizations that are responding to these special needs, many of them just have 2 or 3 very passionate leaders struggling to raise funds to survive. And it is a very tiring, very painful experience to see that how much people put into it and how much more needs to be put into it to respond to the needs of community. I see a quote here on something I haven't first that says, the destruction of the family is the destruction of the nation. And we in Trinidad are now seeing a number of issues that require that concerted, dedicated, professionalized response to the issues.
I just want to add for clarification. There are umbrella type organizations per sector. So for example, on the social development of the people, there's this thing called civil society networks, and they're region specific. Within women, there's the same thing. There's also Rotary that has umbrella organizations. So there are umbrella clusters. But as in an overall civil society mechanism or organization, which I think we're referring to, it does not fully exist with all civil society organizations. And perhaps, Joan, it's the same thing, silo thinking. My area is on disabilities. I don't see why I should be talking to an environmental group. And that makes sense to some extent. But when it comes to policy creation, and you need to mobilize in order to change policy, then it becomes an issue, especially if the environmental group may be more prominent in the public sphere than your disability group. So what it does, especially in areas of funding or policy creation, if you are in silos, it is more of a disadvantage. And that, I think that is the essence of why there's a need. On governance issues, on access to information issues, similar things that you have asked, the number of persons registered in different areas, etc., information that may not be in the public domain. Perhaps climate change affects disability, or perhaps employment issues. They can be integrated in part to a larger strategy, a broader strategy for all groups to say, hey, my issue is this, but there's something else that we're working towards, and that's national development and regional development. So,
no, I was just an observation is that we don't need more NGOs. All right, there is already too much of an overlap. And when we are looking for funding, it's the same issues 2 and 3 organizations are coming with. So people need to examine if you are thinking of having an organization, please do the research. And if there is already an organization that is covering, and we heard 7,000 groups, there is an organization, all right? And some probably need to merge, all right? If we want to really attain the kind of funding that we want. We can't continue with all these cell groups, or silo as you call them. Okay.
Thank you. May I respond to Mrs. Savory's question about mobilizing the national community to discuss the issues? I feel very strongly that we were better off a few years ago when there were consultations that all NGOs participated in talking about social issues. I remember in the 70s and 80s, in the NAR period in particular, there were consultations, and we as social workers used to meet very often in my home late into the night because we want to make a presentation about training of social workers, about services for youths, and so on. And those were very good consultations, systematically organized, and I don't know where the records are today. I feel there's a gap now. There's an absence of the discussion of the interrelationship between poverty, for instance, and crime, or the teenage motherhood and poverty, and all the pathology that we're seeing in the school. We need those discussions to take place. I feel at this stage I'm looking to you young people, because I was running consultations and programs when I was in my 30s and 40s. I'm now nearly approaching 80. So it's hard for me to assume that I'm out of circulation. People don't even know I exist, you know. But I was there when there was a passion, when people were doing things, and some of the research I've been involved in, I haven't seen it repeated. I don't know if it's been repeated. Children in difficult circumstances, the training needs of people who are going to respond to the children who are in the school system, who tell you that the teachers are not nurturing them and don't care about them, don't have any dreams for them. So there's so many issues, and they're located in every system. And what distresses me is the fragmentation of the issues that deal with family and people into system. So this is Ministry of Health, and I'm not hearing the interface between Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education and social development and community development. It's gone, but it used to be nearer an idea of collaboration, the people involved knowing each other, cross-fertilization of ideas, and the funding being rationalized on the basis of felt and identified needs. So there's a whole heap things that are to be done. I agree. I do not know. I am not the person, but I am certainly pulling together some bits and pieces I have to say. I better send this to the minister, because he hasn't heard that we did this 100 years ago, or the prime minister who talked about the parents and the children, the monsters, and doesn't know that we have done research in the children in Excel, in the Beetham, in Malik, in Russell Latapy, and we know that these parents and children have desires like everybody else, which are not being met because of circumstances related to their environment. So, I'm saying, yes, it's a good idea. No, I'm not a person, but I'd certainly be willing to share some of what we have.
You spoke about that first the NGOs promoted certain functions, such as the breakfast share, the feeding program,
Yes,
and also
yes.
the daycare and the nursery. And then you said that afterwards the government took that up as a priority to.
That the government did what?
that the government started to do it as well.
Oh yes,
right?
took over the function, some of them.
So I wanted to ask if it's an official function of the NGOs to promote a social issue that is going on within society and to put it in the face of the government to continue it.
I would say yes. If there is a need in the society and it has outgrown the organization and it is something that is widespread throughout the country, by all means, get legislation for it and put it in place so that everyone can benefit from it.
And another question. You didn't touch on the advertisements. How do you advertise your activities to the public? Because honestly speaking, I haven't.
We have really been lacking in that, you know. How many years, many of you have not heard of the Coterie Social Workers. We have a Facebook page, all right? So I would advise you to go. Now, our information might not be 100% up to date, but for instance, 2 years ago, San Fernando celebrated their 80th anniversary, and they have all the information there on the site. And we are in the process of trying. Remember, one of our, when I read the preamble, was the technological, all right, advancement. We want the younger ones, please, come on board and help us through that technological advancement, because we do need to reach the next generation, and we are lagging behind.
How do you get your members?
How do we get members?
Yeah.
Usually mouth-to-mouth recruitment. Everywhere I go, I step into a ministry, I was on vacation in Florida, somebody next to me, I'm in the coterie, do you want to join the coterie? This is what we are doing, all right? Same way maybe as a Christian, you might approach somebody to tell them about Jesus. You just go, you go about, because this is something that you believe in, and everywhere. But that, of course, can't bring in a vast number of members, which is why we need the technology. But I would say that the main way that we have been doing it is, as in times past, through word of mouth.
And you talked about your education program, right? Is it for particular schools, or do you take students from
anywhere? You mean the Saturday morning program?
Yeah.
Any students willing to join our Saturday morning classes is welcome.
You said, like, for example, St. Vincent de Paul and stuff like that.
Oh, no, I didn't know. I didn't mention St. Vincent de Paul. Ms. Bishop mentioned it.
I was tracing the history of some of the NGOs, saying that there was a period when many of the initiatives were sponsored by either the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church, probably simultaneously. And the St. Vincent de Paul, therefore, is an international organization, but of the Catholic Church, that dedicates its attention to the elderly. And about 50 years ago, we wouldn't have had so many elderly. Now we have a lot of elderly people in Trinidad, and so one has to keep track of the demographics of our country, what programs and policies may be felt needs that are emerging. There was always need for the elderly poor, but now there is need for the elderly, whether you're rich or poor, because people are living longer. Some of them are getting Alzheimer's and all kinds of conditions. The children are few and or have migrated, can't look after them. And so we need for a scientific analysis of the demand, which I think we have in Ministry of Social Development. There was a aging, and Dr. Jennifer Ross has done a wonderful job. But it's bringing it to the attention that we cannot take for granted that what happened in the past, where my mother looked after her mother, her mother-in-law, her grandmother, and her 9 children, that is out of the question in this generation. So we have to think what kind of facilities would be available for the elderly that would respond to the emerging needs. You're living longer, but you may be having sight problems, hearing problems, just basic care, management of your money, and all those things that we would say that that's what the family does, but the family is no longer doing. All right? So I'm saying that the Catholic, they take the children's homes. It was the Anglican Church that set up the St. Mary's Children's Home when there were children on the street, not slavery, forced indenture. A number of parents who came over died on the way, and the children were picked up and died at Anglican Church. And that's how the St. Mary's Children's Home started. The Catholic Church, they picked up children on the streets of Port Spain. St. Dominic's Children's Home. Then the philosophy changed, and they said, we shouldn't have hundreds of children together. Why don't we just have small group homes and replicate the family life experience for these children? Research, we've written about these things, but so that you need, as policy influencers, to be aware that the philosophy changes, and you need as advisors to the Prime Minister or the various ministries to know what is the current philosophy, what has been experienced, what is working and what has not worked. That is what is important.
Are you qualifying for?
I think you could address Dr. Cambridge about that.
This year, as it's the 95th anniversary of the Coterie Social Workers, they are giving $25,000 for a social work third-year student. Social development doesn't qualify. Okay? You have to be majoring in social work, and you have to be a third-year student. And one of the qualifications is that you have to be prepared to help the coterie in the future, in some way. All right? But it doesn't apply to social development.
I want you to know, those of you, because this social policy is so important, and there's a historical view of the evolution of services that you should be aware of. The National Center for Persons with Disabilities published this book last year for the 50th anniversary of the Rehab Center in San Fernando. How many of you know about the Rehab Center? National Center for Persons with Disabilities? Yeah. They were selling it for $400. It's a book written by Kathy Ann Waterman, which is worth having. It has lots of pictures, but I think looking back over the history of NGOs, I don't think I've seen another book that captures the spirit and the history and the evolution of NGOs. And I think if you are serious policy, social policy students, try to get it, or get it and check if it's in your library and read it. It's good reading.
We have a copy of the Disability Studies Unit.
Only one copy? You need several copies. Yes, you need several copies, because I know books disappear from libraries, but this I strongly recommend. Not only because I was there 50 years ago when it was started, and not even then, because the the understanding of evolution of NGO development is captured in this book. And when we talk about why don't you get an umbrella organization, you miss that is a way the politicians think as well. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee you quality of service and create the opportunities that the NGOs create for people from the different sectors to contribute of their finances, their expertise, and so on. And this book illustrates how doctors, private sector organizations, specialists in different fields, teachers, and everybody contributed to the evolution of this organization, which is a wonderful model of best practice.
All right, so this is. Okay.
Of course, the refreshments We will have a vote of thanks, but you could stick along while you're having your refreshments and ask the panelists privately certain questions. And I'm so pleased you're asking. Because we know how that goes sometimes in class.
All right, so it's in relation to our education system. Does the Coterie of Social Workers or any NGO have done any advocacy work to amend the school curriculum that we have right now? Because in our education system, as Dr. Cambridge had began this evening's lecture with us, she spoke about Audrey Jaffas, right? No one in class knew about who was Audrey Jaffas, and that's kind of embarrassing because we don't have a history, a program in school that deals sufficiently enough with the history of Trinidad and Tobago for children to know about it. Apart from the history, we have regular subjects, maths, English, geography, science, what have you. But we don't have subjects to deal with like sex education, financial management, family relationships, and all of these things are what perpetuates the ills of society in which we are trying to curb. So is there any NGOs out there doing work trying to amend the education system or the curriculum? Because it has been unchanged for many years.
I know there are some of our members passionate about getting this information out and into the curriculum. Neela Todd, for example, who wrote The Legacy of the Coterie of Social Workers, has been pushing for that to get on the social studies curriculum. It hasn't happened as yet. One of our members who died this year, Mrs. Wilma Donald Brown, she too was pushing for it to happen, but we haven't seen any fruit of it as yet.
The issue of aging of the leadership of NGOs is a major concern. I know you spoke about the Federation of Women's Institute, and I know the Federation very well and the leadership. And similarly with my organization, we're begging. We need new blood to come in, but in the case of creative parenting that we evolved a curriculum, we wanted funding to train young people like yourselves in the methodology so that a whole new generation could be out there sharing this information. Unfortunately, the funding is not as easy as it was a few years ago. In the case of the Federation of Women's Institute, they can't get the young people to come in. The young people would probably say, well, it's an old people organization. There are other models of recruitment. For instance, some of the banks have been able to partner with organizations and allow staff to support some of the initiatives, particularly in the area of sport. And one last thought, I would like to share and revisit as you talk about education, the role that Royal Bank Star Class played. How many of you participated in Royal Bank Star Class? Any of you? Don't even know. Royal Bank Star Class program, no? Well, in between the 80s and the 90s, when the Royal Bank sponsored, and I think it probably still goes on, Form 4 class of all the schools were invited to identify a social problem in their community, to come up with a response to that problem, to design the strategy that they would use to, yeah, I'm just saying that I found one because I was involved in judging the first three in the 80s, and I was amazed at what I was writing about, and I would like to share it, and I'll share it with you, because what the children learn from themselves creating responses to problems in the community. And all the schools across Trinidad were doing it because it was facilitated by staff in the Royal Bank in the different districts. And there was a common program, a standard program they repeated every year.
So just to wrap, and I'm going to try to be extremely brief. In terms of consultations, that's one of the key issues, and it should be an issue for all social policy students and civil society organizations. There's usually an attendance register at consultations. That should be publicly available to find out who was consulted, and usually that's not. So that's the first key issue there. Secondly, the issue of education. Even at the university, we usually tell students that you can be employed in 2 sectors, not 3. Private sector or the public sector, and hardly ever in the nonprofit sector. And I think that is one of our faults, by not saying that there are jobs, and some of them well-paying jobs too, depending on if you're an executive director, because, as I said, our executive director was paid relatively well at Veneer Pond. So I think there are a number of issues to be addressed, but generally it speaks to how do we connect those dots, because there are NGOs doing work on the ground in homework centers, in village councils, etc. But how do we connect all of these initiatives? How do we break down these silos to say we are making an impact, which comes back to how do we measure our progress?
Saying thanks to all who have contributed to this informative exchange of ideas. We have certainly learned a great deal about the history of the Coterie. We have learned about the milestones that have been overcome and the issues that have impacted these organizations. First, I must thank Dr. Cambridge for initiating this forum. I would also like to thank the panel, Ms. Mona Thompson, Ms. Joan Bishop, Mr. Josh Drayton. I would also like to thank Ms. Savary for your presentations, which were indeed very informative. I would also like to thank additional members, Ms. Ursula Degoville, Mr. Ansel Luke, and I would also like to say additional thanks to all members of the Coterie who have not been named, but have also assisted in making this program a success. I'd also like to thank you who have participated in the discussions, and to all of you for being part of this audience. Many thanks to those who have provided the refreshments. Do enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
I have really learned quite a lot, and I am still I'm very inquisitive to find out more, because I am looking at Ms. Thompson. I'm looking at how we can use Ms. Bishop and Mr. Josh within our organization. Maybe within the year or next year, God's willing, right? Because I think we have a lot to learn about everything. I would like, permit me very quickly to address the male here. You would have heard a lot of mention of a lot of women organizations. There are male organizations, and I challenge you to find out about the male organizations and what they are doing, and see where you can fit in. And if you find that there are no male organizations that are giving to, lending an ear to the issues that you think you would like to work with, maybe you can form your own. You can form, or I should say form one. Form a male organization to deal with the issues of the young male in our society. Ms. Thompson asked that we not start more organizations, because yes, we have a lot. And I spoke about some organizations, just we are doing work that's overlapping, and other areas of the country and other issues are being neglected. So you can take note of that and really see what is being neglected, and if you can start something. And permit me to appeal to all of you. You are the youth of this nation, and we need to rebuild our nation. And you are the ones who will be able to help with that rebuilding. You cannot rebuild it on your own. We, as senior members in the society, senior citizens, we cannot build it on our own. However, look at the work that has been done by our age group and those who are older, and see where you can help. Some of the bricks might be falling apart, and you can add new bricks to it. Some of the windows falling, you can add louvers to it. But do something and not think about finishing this program and being able to get out there and get to work and then lime on the avenue in the night. That's not life. All of us here, as the senior citizens in this country, can tell you, yes, we lime, and we still liming. I am one who, Ms. Thompson made mention of a branch in the Coterie. We go to the boardwalk on Mondays, I go. You have a good time. Very good time running from the fish sometimes. They jump up out the water and back in, etc. Right? You're swimming and a fish might hit you, whap up on your behind because you're in the territory. But we do have fun. And you can have fun, but yet work assiduously and help build your country. And look after your neighbor. And your neighbor is not the person who lives next door to you. The neighbor is anybody you pass on the street who you don't know. And if people greet them, they do not respond, or they say, okay. Reach out and touch. Help your neighbor. You do not have to thin yourself out in doing that, but say good morning to somebody on the street. If at nights when you reflect on what we did for the day, and you did not say good morning to someone who you do not know, well then you have grieved the Spirit. And Christians will know about this. So, thanks. Again, you had the vote of thanks. And I may not remember everybody. When I see you on the street, feel free to say miss. Right? People just call me miss. Okay? Feel free. And safe traveling mercies to each and every one of us. And may we meet our homes as we would like. May we meet our homes as we would like from all what's going on in our country. Okay, thank you.
All right.
The Federation is celebrating its 70th anniversary.
Well,
The head office of the Federation is based in Coterie. But we go out to the other branches and so on, and they're doing wonderful work. It's, you have all over the country, St. George, East St. George, West, the river, all the offices, and we fall under the Ministry of Community Development and Social Development.
Yes, this is the second branch of the Coterie of Social Workers, which was opened in San Fernando in 1934. Here are most of the members, and this is what a meeting was like in the olden days. So many people, today's meeting only have the bare quorum, which is 8 of us. Right? They still do school feeding, and they have a day nursery. That is all that is continued in the San Fernando branch. They are located on the coffee at La Carib Street in San Fernando. Okay? Then we go to Barataria. This is the Siparia branch of the Coterie of Social Workers. This is the third branch. This was opened, and this was done in the year 1957. These are the members who opened the Coterie at that particular time. Some of them are still alive, but the others have passed on. Okay, so we go to Siparia now. Here we have the Separia branch, which was opened in 1961. At the moment, this particular branch is feeding the most schools in the South Trinidad. They're still functioning, very much alive. So those are the only branches that we have pictures of that we can share with you. This is a picture of the founder of the Coterie of Social Workers, Audrey Lane Jeffers. And I'm happy to say that I knew her personally. This is what she looked like, and this is how she started this organization, which is 95 years old at this date. Nice to have met her and work with her. Here we have Mrs. Lister Charles. She got the Chaconia medal, silver. She was the first president of the Coterie after Audrey Jeffers, and she ran the home for, she was head of the nursery in San Fernando. She did a very good job with that. She saw about the children. She cared for them while she was alive. So she was a member of the San Fernando branch of the Coterie of Social Workers. Here we have Beryl Patrick Doyle. She was president for the years 1981 to 87, and she was also head of the children's nursery. We had a nursery on Cipriani Boulevard named after her. And here we have Yvonne Lucas. She was our president from 87 to 91. Here we have Mrs. Shirley Hunt. She was a member of the Separia branch. She was president from 1991 to 1997. We have here Miss Arlene Hodge. She was our president in 1998. She served for 2 sessions, which is 4 years. Also a member of the Separia branch of the Coterie of Social Workers. Here we have Elva Thomas. She was president for 2000 to 2003. She was a member of the Port of Spain branch and also the treasurer of the Port of Spain branch for years. Elva has passed on, as most of Wilma Donald Brown. She was president from 2004 to 2006. Wilma passed on Ash Wednesday this year, 2016.
What you can say about the Horn now?
We have Louise Horn. She was our executive director from 1973 to 1980. The hall in which we are standing was named after her. She did quite a good job as executive director after being a member for how many years. So we have a lot to thank her for in building the Coterie to what it is today. It is nice to know that her daughter, Miss Inette Cambridge, is continuing to work for the Coterie of Social Workers, making sure that she spread it. And even at age 95, even though the Coterie is age 95, trying to get younger people interested in the work done for the Coterie of Social Workers.